So take it away, Wayne.
Sounds great. So good afternoon, everyone. Really glad you are all here. We're honored to have Dick Horst, who's a long-term friend of the lab and the founder and president of UserWorks, which is a DC area consulting firm that specializes in UX design and evaluation. So Dr. Horst founded UserWorks over 30 years ago and has piloted that company through the upturns and downturns that happen with any small business, including dealing with the current COVID-19 pandemic. He has a bachelor's degree from Bucknell University and earned master's and doctoral degrees from Carnegie Mellon in cognitive psychology. He has a background in psychophysiological research, leading many early research projects at University of Illinois and University of Maryland Medical School right here. For the past 10 years, UserWorks has been supporting Booz Allen Hamilton in helping the US Postal Service enhance its web presence. And he's here today to discuss this project with us as an opportunity and a prompt to reflect on some of the similarities and differences between applied and academic research in HCI. Dick, we're really glad you're here and look forward to the talk.
Well, thank you very much, Wayne. Let's see, shall I switch over to my slide deck?
Sounds great. And as usual, folks, feel free to post questions in the chat, and when we have breakpoints, we'll have a chance to engage them.
Okay, so when I was invited to give this talk, I signed up for your listserv, and so I've been seeing the announcements about the other speakers in your brown bag series, and I'm really impressed with the variety and quality of the speakers that you've got lined up. It's really a high-powered group. I, of course, recognized a couple of my consulting colleagues, Corey Levson and Bill Killam. What they talk to you about is very similar probably to some of the things that I'll be talking about. But a lot of your speakers, particularly those in academic settings, appear to be doing very groundbreaking work. What I'm going to talk about is probably not very groundbreaking. It's kind of bread and butter consulting work and the project that I'm going to highlight today is work we've been doing for a number of years for the US Postal Service. Nonetheless, I think it's, at least to me, important and worthwhile. And as Wayne said, toward the end, I'll sort of pontificate for a few minutes about what I see as kind of similarities and dissimilarities between kind of applied research that I'll be talking about and the more groundbreaking, if you will, the more, I wouldn't say theoretical or pure research. I don't know, if people use that term anymore, but there definitely is a distinction between the sort of consulting work that we do in industry and the kind of work that you do in academia. Nonetheless, they share a number of characteristics, which is my main point. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit first about my company, UserWorks, just to give you a little background on kinds of things we do. And then I'll show you some screenshots of the US Postal Service e-commerce website and web presence. And then talk more specifically about some of the work that we've been doing in that context. And some, again, screenshots and examples of design issues that have come up and some representative design recommendations that we have offered in the course of doing that. And then we'll wrap up with, as I say, a few points about applied research in industry versus academic research. I guess it would be best to sort of hold the questions until I'll try to remember along the way a few times to ask for questions. And you'll see I've got more slides, and a lot of the slides have more text on them than we're going to really have time to deal with. But I lifted many of these slides from our reports to the Postal Service. So the reason there's so much text on the slides is that they serve both as stimuli for us in giving presentations like this, as well as serves as our final report to our clients. Okay, so a little bit about UserWorks. I've had the company for just over 30 years now. We're small, we always have been, 11, 12 people at any given time. Our backgrounds are, people come at this field from a variety of ways, a variety of directions. Some of the degrees that our people have are shown here. We share, however, a common interest in user experience, and some would say human factors, or UX, user experience design and evaluation. So I don't want to do too much of a sales pitch here, but I did want to just give you a little bit of an intro. I'm assuming that in inviting people like me and Corey and Bill to speak to you, you're, I hope, interested in hearing about how things are going in the consulting world, and maybe how it differs, or maybe how it supports the kind of work that you do. We look to groups like yours, and I mean, you're the HCIL Labs, a particularly good example of university people whose work we try to follow. And it's surprising, really, the number of times when we have the occasion to drop references to your work in talking with our clients and marketing ourselves. So it's good for us to know about what you're doing. And I just wanted to sort of highlight that point because, like I say, it comes up more frequently than you might think. We do a variety of, we work in a variety of business domains. Much of our work, as is the case with many in the industry, I think, is now dealing with websites and applications and mobile apps and so forth. One of the areas in which we're not unique, but a little different than some is in recent years, particularly an emphasis on medical devices, in both devices and software, actually. So we've been doing quite a lot of that in recent years. That work has suffered in the last year because of the pandemic, in that particularly the medical device work almost all needs to be done in person with the participant sitting beside our moderator. And you know, for a while in the past year, it's been difficult to do that. We did get geared back up in the fall and have conducted, I guess, 4 usability testing studies back in the fall. And since that, we're in person, and they went surprisingly well. We didn't know if it would be difficult to get people to come in and to be participants in those studies, but many of the people in the healthcare related studies are healthcare practitioners, and of course they have their hands full these days treating people. But somewhat surprisingly, and to our delight, it didn't prove too much more difficult than usual to get those kind of people away from their day jobs and to come in and into the lab and perform for us. Some of the other areas that are down at the bottom of the screen are other business domains that we've dealt with and continue to. The methods that we employ are probably pretty familiar to most of you, so I won't read them all off, but if you glance over this list, I think you'll probably recognize most of these methods. Again, nothing too out of the ordinary, really, in terms of the kind of tools that consulting folks use. Whenever I go to conferences and human factors conferences, and human factors conferences are even worse than UX conferences in terms of people's talks seem to emphasize the doom and gloom of doing this kind of work. Oh, the client's not listening to my recommendations, and have trouble dealing with developers and project managers, and oh, if they'd only listen to me, all this good work that I'm doing would not be for naught. It drives me nuts, really, hearing that for years now. It's getting a little better. People like Ben Schneiderman's talks are not that way. His are very uplifting. And I suspect that's the case with some of the rest of you as well. So keep doing that. The complaining about difficulties with implementation and so forth gets old real fast. My talk is not going to be like that. I'm going to talk about a client that we've had for a number of years now who, to our way of seeing things, at least, are doing things right. They're bought into the notion of user research and user-centered design, and are quite serious about it. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. In terms of our practice, we have facilities here nearby. We're just one exit off the Beltway west of you, off New Hampshire Avenue. And at this site, I haven't spent much time at this site, to tell you the truth, in the last year. We still have people working from home most of the time, but I am here in the office today. We have two usability lab suites. Some of you have visited us on occasion. I can't tell you. Some of you with Kent's class a couple years ago. I miss doing things like that during the pandemic. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to that very soon. But anyway, we have two in-house labs. We have portable equipment that can take the show on the road and collect data in field settings. And I won't go into much more detail on that at all, except to mention that another aspect of our business is recruiting participants, not only for our own studies, but as a service to colleagues. And then that's turned out to be quite a nice sort of side aspect of our work, and it's a separate revenue stream that's actually been booming even in the last year. Again, I won't spend time reading all the words on these slides, but that pretty much gives you a feel for, hopefully, our the types of work that we do and capabilities we have. So, Postal Service. Postal Service gets a lot of criticism. If you follow the news, you know that they're in the news quite frequently, usually being criticized by someone in Congress or criticized by the public on social media. If your mail turned out the way mine did back in the fall around the time of the election, would have noticed a definite slowdown in deliveries. Of course, they were accused of doing that on purpose in order to make it more difficult for Democrats to vote. I have no insight into that whatsoever, but other than I bring it up only because, as you probably know, the Postal Service is kind of a pseudo government agency. It's not really part of the government, but it is subsidized heavily by the government. Despite that, they lose routinely tens of billions of dollars a year, every year, year after year. And there are reasons for that, but I bring that up just mostly to draw the contrast between those criticisms and the people that we are working for there, which is the folks who maintain their web presence. That whole part of their business is in pretty good shape, I think. We've been involved for almost 10 years now, working through Booz Allen. We're a subcontractor to them. And during that time, the Postal Service has converted much of their business from, functions that you used to have to get in your car, drive down to the local post office and take care of business there, get a passport or pick up your mail or whatever, or ship packages, you know, all of that migrated to the web, as well as a number of new features which you may or may not be up on, but they are really trying to modernize their operations and have been quite successful in doing that, I think. We don't get involved in evaluating their benefits and costs and revenues, but there are people at the Postal Service who do that for a living. And you know, the website has become a real revenue generator for the Postal Service. So this is mostly a success story from my standpoint, and not just because they hired us to do some of the work, but they're doing a pretty good job with it. I would like to, and I do think that what we are doing for them makes it better, you know, improves things, makes it easier to use, results in heavier usage and more efficient usage. And I'll try to show you some examples of that here in a few minutes. But yeah, by and large, this is a success story, I think. Due in small part to what we do, but in large part to the competence of the people they have in-house. And of course, the Booz Allen people that we work with are quite competent. So this has been, they've probably been one of our best customers for over 10, almost 10 years now. We have a great working relationship with the Booz Allen project managers. Some of you know Jeff Pass, and in the last year or two, Alex Turgeon. They're the ones we deal with the most. And they have other subcontractors who do some of the design work and pretty much all of the development work that results from the design input. We have some input into the design process, not just drawing conclusions from our user research, but you know, illustrating some of the recommendations that we make. So we contribute to that design work, but our main role is user research. So the Postal Service is what I would call an enlightened client, kind we like. The people there, the folks who maintain their website are part of their market brand development group. And so that group does things other than the website, but it is responsible for what you will see is a huge number of functions and aspects of the website that transact business. So in general, I think there are exceptions to this, of course, but in general, they stand out among our clientele. And I mean, we have a lot of good clients of this sort, but they really take seriously the notion of a user-centered design process. They see the value in it. They have shown through us a sustained commitment to user research. The e-commerce aspect of their business is increasingly important to their competitiveness and position in the marketplace. They do have competitors in some of their areas of business. And they are actively exploring and have implemented already a number of new online services that go above and beyond the kinds of things that you could get in your car and drive down to the post office and do in person. And I'll mention a few of those here in a moment. So if you haven't been to the USPS.com for a while, this is what it looked like last night. I was putting these slides together. And you see here across the top a number of some quick tools and kind of areas of the business. You can send things, you can receive things. They have a store for, I'll show you some examples of that. There's both a consumer-facing aspect to their business and a services to businesses, including volume shippers, direct mail, that sort of thing. They have an international shipping aspect to what they do. So if I open up that Quick Tools menu, these are the functions that result. You can, the kinds of things you would expect, and FedEx and UPS and those services offer as well. Tracking a package, scheduling a pickup, and then there's changing your address in their records, and the address that the mailman brings your mail to you from at. Shipping, including volume shippers. There are some people who spend every day on this website because they run a business that does all the shipping. Buying stamps, of course, is something you would think would be offered. Putting holds on mail. Click and ship is, again, there's a consumer aspect and a business aspect. So most of those things are functions that you would expect. Informed delivery is one of the relatively new features. And if you don't know what that is where you can sign up for free to have them email you as to what's coming, what's in the mail headed your way, and it gives you a heads up also as to when it will arrive. Now, it's not foolproof. It's not available in all zip codes yet. But it's a service that you wouldn't have were it not for the web. And there's a bunch of other new modern services of that sort that are in various stages of implementation. You can still get a passport at the post office, and much of that process can be fulfilled online now. There's a loyalty program. Everybody has a loyalty program. Let's see, nothing too noteworthy here, I guess. They have a store, as I mentioned. What do they have in the store? You can buy stamps and choose from a wide variety. If you look on the left-hand column here, you can filter your choices of items in the store along a variety of dimensions. Of course, some of these stamps are collector's items. Beyond stamps, if you forgot your kid's birthday, you can get them a model of a postal truck, t-shirts, coasters, a variety of things that are offered through the store. And, at $5, $10, $20 a pop, it's not going to make too much of a dent in those tens of billions, but every little bit helps, I guess. The design of the store encounters many of the challenges that other e-commerce sites have. And so a number of the studies that we've been involved in have dealt in one way or another with that business transactional shopping. Okay, this is informed delivery that I just mentioned. Talk a little bit more about that later. This is another new, if you look at the top here, promotions and incentives and integrating mail with technology and new print techniques. So that would be like barcode readers or QR codes, and using your phone to sense those and then follow up. There's apps that you can download that transact business with the Postal Service based on those shortcuts. So my main point here is, much of this would be expected of the Postal Service, I guess, but my main point is that they are also breaking new ground in terms of online services and trying to stay one up on the competition in so doing. You with me so far? Any questions? I'm gonna branch into talking about more specifically some of the types of studies we've done for them.
No, looks good. No questions so far. People have just been raving about the visits you hosted for our 631 students back in 2019.
I'm sorry, I didn't get all of that. Let me turn the speaker up a little bit here.
Sure, we have no questions yet from people in the audience,
Okay,
but in chat, people have been enthusiastically remembering the visits that you hosted for our students in our introductory class.
Good. We always enjoy interacting with students in that way. And as I say, I've kind of missed that in the last year, but hopefully we'll get back to being able to do that safely here before long. All right, so these are, I just listed somewhat at random the topics of a number of our studies. So I won't take time to read through this, but if you just glance down over the list, you'll see, a lot of usability testing, some card sorting, tree testing. I'm assuming you know what that is. If you don't, I just ask. And there are some recurring themes like click and ship. We've done a number of studies at really over a period of years involving different aspects of shipping, both domestic shipping and international. If you're kind of a regular customer of the store, you can set up an account. If you're not, you can come in as a guest, and there's a guest checkout process, which is slightly different than the process you go through if you have an account. There's online bridge to international claims. OBIC is functionality that allows you to, if you're sending internationally and your package is damaged or lost or whatever, and you have a claim against it, there's functionality for doing that. If you need to locate the nearest post office, Locator is an app for doing that. Deliver the Win was a really interesting one. This was back around in the fall, just after the elections, and this was a sub-site aimed at political operatives and political campaigns. So we got to them just after they would have been very busy with the election, but it allows, it's to encourage direct mailing specifically for political purposes. It was of interest to us because the participants that we had to recruit were political people who had just been through the campaign. And the purpose of the study was to see how readily usable that website was and to make changes for the anticipation of it being of use in the future election campaigns. And actually, another point that I would like to make as we go along here is that, as I said, I think by and large, the web presence of the Postal Service is in pretty good shape. And the improvements that we are making to it, I think, are kind of just incremental tweaks that, hopefully improve things, make it more efficient, allow more steady usage, encourages people to come back more frequently. Deliver the Win had some more difficult problems, and I feel they're in the process of implementing the recommendations now, but so we'll see how that turns out. But I think that was an instance where there was the potential, at least, for greater impact on the design process and usability of the site. Let's see what else we have here. So this slide just summarizes some of the methodologies that we have used, specifically in this Postal Service domain. So the column on the left is methods used. Column on the right is the types of deliverables that have been involved. So a lot of usability testing, both in person and remote. In the last year, it's been all remote for obvious reasons. They have pivoted very smoothly to that, and by and large, as I said earlier, the things like the medical device work that we had been doing really suffered in the past year. We are getting back to that now and have done a few studies and have a few coming up here very soon. But for most of this e-commerce type work, as long as the customer is comfortable with it, you can really do as well interacting with remotely located participants as you can, having them come in person for most applications. So this has really, they've been our best customer in the last year, and thank goodness for that. So they've been able to, continue a pretty steady stream of progress on their web presence with all remote user research. So typically we are dealing with both desktop and mobile use of various functionality, and sometimes both consumer and business users, or one or the other. Guerrilla testing is, that's a term that means different things to different people. Here it means kind of smallish usability testing, quick turnaround, not a lot, a day or two of preparation before pulling in participants. Very quick turnaround of results, lean reporting, that kind of thing. But yeah, they're doing more and more of that. To some people, guerrilla testing would mean, stopping people on the way to the cafeteria and asking them their opinion about some design in kind of just a several minute exercise. This is a little bit more formal than that, but compared to the bigger, higher end studies that we do, it's more smallish, quick turnaround, lean type testing. First click analysis is another thing that we've done occasionally. Card sorting in order to help define information architectures and user expectations in that. Tree tests to try out to sort of validate information architectures. Early on in that 10-year period, we were involved in a major audit, content audit of the web presence. And I mean, that was back when they were kind of strategically planning what they could do to improve the e-commerce aspects. So, we identified a bunch of content that was not getting much usage and that they ended up jettisoning. Identified some duplication that could be cleaned up, some inconsistencies that could be improved upon. So that was an interesting exercise, and one that made more sense back, 5 to 10 years ago than it would make right now. I think they have a pretty good handle on what their content consists of. User satisfaction ratings play into a lot of these studies. Sometimes in-depth interviews, which are more, what would people expect, with not really watching them perform and try to accomplish tasks. That's more usability testing. But yeah, the in-depth interviews are more conceptual and what would you expect types of questions. Cognitive walkthroughs of usually low fidelity early on prototypes where the functionality has not been fully built out in a clickable way. So again, nothing too unusual there, I don't think, but again, my main point is that there's a variety of tools we can bring to the table and have done so on this for this client. And yeah, a lot of it's been usability testing, but on occasion we have utilized quite a variety of methods. The deliverables tend to be verbiage, written reports, highly illustrated though with screenshots and illustrations of design recommendations, either as wireframes or sort of design comps. Content maps, journey maps, task flow diagrams, information architectures, site might be site maps, might be tree structures, whatever. Menu structures and wordings. Problem severity ratings. We do try to indicate kind of the impact of some of the problems that we find and recommendations we're making. We haven't really had a seat at the table. That would be my one, hope for the future, is to kind of have a seat at the table when they are considering what recommendations to implement and when to do so and which ones to prioritize. The types of design issues that we're dealing with. The clock here. So we end at 1:30, is that right, Wayne? And we want to leave a little room for questions and discussion.
Yes, that'd be great.
So I'll speed up a little bit here. So some of the types of design issues that we deal with are these. Are the offerings apparent to users? As I said, there's a lot of functionality on the website now that users wouldn't necessarily expect because it's new or more modern, online ways of doing things as opposed to running to your local post office and appearing in person. So one design challenge is to make those offerings readily apparent to users and to introduce them to some of these new features. Once a user knows that they need something, they have something in mind, can they readily find it? And in a large enterprise website like this, there's a lot of nooks and crannies and places things could be. So it's a design challenge to make things findable, searchable, navigable. And then once they find wherever they're going, whatever they're interested in, can users successfully transact business using the site? And again, most of the improvements that we're able to make by these methods that I just mentioned are really kind of relatively minor improvements, but which would show up in shorter time on task, less abandonment of pages, maybe in increased sales, certainly better paths to content of interest. Can users know, there are issues of designing for stickiness, as people say, encouraging people to stay and browse around. But by and large, users of this site are not going to be hanging out for fun and not expecting, gamification and things like that. So a design challenge really is to allow people to get accomplished whatever task they had in mind, and to, if they have a second task in mind, to be able to navigate smoothly to that second area of interest. So that is a challenge in and of itself, I think, to design with that sort of findability or to make it easy to do that. Is the site usable by both occasional and high volume users? As I said, some people are on the site every day, probably every hour, because of the type job they have or the type business that they run. And then there are people, like me, like many of you, who would only go to this site when they would need to do something specific. They need to ship a package, or they need to track down something that's late in arriving, or they need to buy a toy, postal truck. They have something specific in mind. So, but they're not. They're only occasional users, and they're basically novices to the site. The next few slides just give you a taste of the types of data we collect and how it's presented. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this was a situation in that OBIC, which is the online bridge to international claims functionality that I mentioned. The one task was participants were asked what would they do if a package they sent overseas was damaged in transit. Where on the website would they go to initiate a claim? When asked where they would go, the various participants took off in different directions, went down different paths. Most of them did find, 11 of 14 did find where they needed to go, but for some of them, after considerable poking around. This is a categorization of where the number of users who went down different paths in order to get there. By and large, most of them found it with relatively little frustration. And when we followed up by asking kind of what their expectations were and whether there was any more direct path that they would prefer, they did have ideas about some additional ways in which they would think about where to go for such functionality, where on this site to go. So that's very typical. I mean, it's kind of loosey-goosey, task structures, but trying to be, somewhat quantitative in categorizing people's behaviors, again, based on our observations of them performing these tasks, and following up with probing questions to get users' ideas about, themselves, how things could be made better. So this is from that same study, just summary findings. I won't take time to go through these in detail, but and then a summary of the recommendations that result from those findings. Again, most of these recommendations are use the website. It can be more usable and some more readily usable in some instances. But great, your internet connection is unstable, it says. I don't know if you saw that, but nonetheless. So these are the kinds of recommendations that emerge, and some more of them. We try to illustrate when appropriate by showing screenshots like on the right here. Or, let's see. Or illustrating our recommendations with these mock-ups of either wireframes or, in this case, a little bit more content to illustrate our design ideas and recommendations. Thinking that that has more impact than just a verbal description, a textual description. This was another set from the Deliver the Win, the political direct mail study. I don't want to dwell on this either, but as I was gonna, if I did have time to dwell on it, I would point out some of them slightly more impactful, more drastic recommendations that emerged from this study. there really were some points of confusion here that would have prevented and did prevent some of the participants from accomplishing the tasks we had given them. So, you know, those are more concerning issues whenever people just can't accomplish the task. I'm just going to click through these, I think, but well, maybe worth mentioning here the different types of recommendations. Some involve content, some involve architecture, information architecture, interaction design, iconography. So all those aspects, and I think there's even more, yeah, navigation, layout, form design, labeling. One issue in this site was the widespread usage of the acronym GOTV, which apparently political people know that means get out the vote. But not everybody, not all of the participants did know. We tried to recruit people from sort of small, not just national campaigns. We did get some people like that, but also local campaigns and people who would volunteer their services to participate in these campaigns. So yeah, some of the participants did not know the lingo, and in this case, the site didn't do a good job of acquainting them with what the definition of that meant. So some people had all kinds of other interpretations. This was another, again, just this series of slides was to illustrate the types of design issues that emerged, the findings and how we sort of present those, and then here on this last slide or two, the recommendations and illustrations of what we think are design improvements. All right. So I wanted to just offer a few comments. I assume in inviting people like me and Corey Lepps and Bill Killam, you are interested in perhaps how things differ in the consulting world versus academic research. No doubt because a lot of you are in grad school and will need to make some choices as to where to find jobs. Applied research is different in a number of ways. It's usually, no surprise here, oriented towards solving a particular problem or set of problems, or evaluating the usability of a particular prototype design, as opposed to, you know, breaking new ground in terms of developing some methodology or tool or widget of the sort that is useful in a more broad general sense. Some of the widgets that you develop have been useful to us, and we point them out to clients, and clients incorporate them in their implementations. So we sort of feed off you in some sense. But the applied work is more, I mean, there's pros and cons to this. It kind of depends on what you get off on, I guess, as to what the frustration for me back in my days when I was doing more research in an academic setting. In my case, it was psychophysiology type work, which I was very interested in. But the frustration, of course, was you spend all this time doing the work and writing it up and going through drafts and getting it published, and then hopefully a few people read it and act upon it. But it's often, you often don't know to what extent it's read or cited. I mean, there's citation indexes, I realize, but you just don't readily see the immediate impact. Whereas here, usually the developers are chomping at the bit to get your recommendations and act on them. And so we try to be as good as we can at offering actionable design recommendations. And usually within weeks, sometimes days, you can see the results of that in a new prototype. So we're very quick turnaround, more and more all the time. and measurable impact. Now, again, we're not the ones doing the measuring by and large. I wish we were, and I wish we could weasel ourselves into that aspect of the operation. But there are people at the Postal Service who do that for a living. And so the way that they measure the impact of these design changes are things like web analytics or sales of the things that they're selling, reduced help desk usage. That's a big money saver if you can eliminate a few seats in the help center. Customer satisfaction ratings that maybe pop up, questionnaires that come up on the screen periodically, social media, number of congresspersons who are complaining about this or that, a variety of means of assessing customer satisfaction. Despite the sort of different orientation of this applied research, I would like to think that there's the necessity and room for maintaining one's scientific integrity. And while a lot of this research, as I mentioned earlier, may seem a little loosey-goosey in terms of the interactions with participants and whatnot, I think there are ways in which what we do is very similar to what you would do in collecting data in a more academic, with a more academic interest in mind. First and foremost among that is selecting truly representative users to be participants in these studies. And we take that very seriously. As I mentioned, that's one aspect of what we do that has developed into sort of a sidelight of our business. So we do make money off that too, but we view it as very important, not only for our own research, but for those where we're helping recruit participants for others to really get the right people. Avoiding bias in moderating these sessions, even though the interaction, the dialogue with participants is somewhat free-flowing, one does have to be careful not to introduce biases either by the order in which you present things, the feedback that you give, both verbal and nonverbal, the way instructions are posed, the wording of task scenarios. So all of that is very similar, I think, to the kinds of data, behavioral data you would collect in most of your experiments. And we rarely break open a statistical package, I would have to say, but occasionally. And we do try to be conscious of, again, in the context of avoiding bias, things like counterbalancing experimental conditions or the order in which we present different challenges to users. So those are just some general thoughts. Again, probably nothing earth-shaking, but I think there are similarities and dissimilarities with the kind of work that you're used to, and pros and cons to the environment that we're working in. And it's more in the area of immediate gratification, which to me is more fun than spending months on a paper, publishing it, and waiting a year for it to come out. But to each his own. I do want to put in a plug here for if you are interested in working with us in one way or another. We do maintain a participant database, so if you're interested in signing up to be informed about our upcoming studies, we'd be happy to have you on our database. Collaborating on research ideas, we occasionally have collaborated with students on capstone projects or other research. We usually have more ideas than we have time to implement, and we really gravitate more towards the billable, payable type projects rather than the fun research type projects. So if you are looking for ideas, we may be able to seed your SEED, seed your ideas. We do typically have an intern or two, paid or unpaid, usually paid, actually, usually paid pretty well, I think. I'm proud to say that we haven't laid anybody off in the last year. We came close, but survived in pretty good shape. And they're looking pretty good for the foreseeable future here. So we do have an intern coming on board here in a few weeks for a short period of time. We'd probably be interested in another one or two for the summer and perhaps beyond. And on occasion, we haven't added anybody in the last year either, but there's hope of that. So please keep in touch. That's my story. Sorry, I didn't leave too much room for questions.
Great, we do have a few moments. There are a few questions that are queued up on both. We'll start off with Ben here.
Well, actually, right before that, I apologize, everybody, but I actually have to pop off and do some symposium sponsorship business. So I have a call with AARP. And so I'm going to let Wayne take it from here. But just before I do that, I am going to show you. Sorry, I'm just going to do a really quick plug for the symposium. You'll be hearing about this every week until the end of May. It's coming up on May 27th. The schedule is online. As you can see, it's a really robust schedule. Ben is actually doing a tutorial. I'll come down here. We have a lot of sessions and a lot of programs. Ben is doing a tutorial on human-centered AI, trusted, reliable, and safe and trustworthy. You can register. It's free this year. It's virtual. We do hope to see you there. I am definitely looking for some volunteers to help throughout the day. You'll be seeing notices about that. But I am going to pass the baton back to Wayne and to Ben to do the questions, and thanks.
Hey, thanks, Beth. Ben, please.
Thanks. Yes. Thank you, Dick. It's just a pleasure to see you. I just feel like saying hello for one. And
yeah,
it was
good to see you.
Great to work with you on a project. It was many years ago, but it really gave me a full appreciation for the depth and importance of what you do. And I wanted to encourage my colleagues and the students to work with you. And I hope there'll be actually even stronger ways. You offered internships and possibilities of working, but I think we should maybe make that much more of a reliable connection and build more things. You're just close by. We could walk over to you.
Right.
And,
no, we would welcome that. We've actually had more involvement with people from the UMBC, but historically, but yeah, we would welcome.
Right. I mean, you're a terrific resource and people should know about it. And I just wanted to say thank you. And it was great to learn about your effort on USPS. I mean, I've used their website and it, really is a well done job. And that's the kind of good work. And as you said, if you want to have an impact, work with UserWorks. So thank you, Dick, and good to see you and take care.
Good to see you.
That's great. Many thanks. We do have a question from a student here who's been very interested in the methods that you've talked about. And Purva asks, what kind of testing would you say helps to identify a good number of the issues of an interface? Where do you start? What's best?
Well, there's a variety, of course, of methods that can be brought to bear even in the realm of usability testing. And some of those are moderated and some are unmoderated. I tend to think the moderated, the ability to really go back and forth with a participant and not only watch them perform, but then talk to them about it. And, if it's a more formative as opposed to summative type study, encouraging the participant to think aloud as they're going about trying to accomplish a task. That's very informative for us as observers. So that's probably at the top of our list and what we do most often. But yeah, there's a variety of variations on that theme that we do employ from time to time. The first click analysis that I mentioned, we don't do that very often, but occasionally that's helpful. Combining observable data with web analytics is another. Yeah, I don't know if does that get at whoever asked that?
Right, sounds good.
Okay.
Any other closing questions folks have? If not, let's say thank you very much. We look forward to future opportunities to work together,
Great.
and hopefully some other tours that we can have coming on out to the facility. Those are legendary. So
Thank you.
I would always take my students in my graduate class to have a tour of UserWorks. Was always wonderful to see it in progress, and Dick would talk and then have some of his staff lead us through the various rooms and go through the procedures. It was very good, and they even have wonderful snacks. So back when this pandemic is over, I've retired, so I'm not going to do it, but I would really suggest that anybody teaching a usability class, head over to UserWorks. Just put them all in your van, university van, and you're there.
hey,
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Great, well, wonderful. Well, thank you all. We'll see you next week, and have a good one.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. And Dick, I just want to say thank you so much for spending the time to do this today.
Sure.
We really appreciate the opportunity. And I was delighted to see how many familiar faces you've brought on the team lately. On from UMBC, that you had Neha and Manu and Shruti.
Yeah. They
Quite a group.
we like that conduit, and